Today, I'm going to speak candidly about my greatest loss, the death of my love, Mark, and how that one event sent me on an insatiable spiritual journey to find him on the other side. I'll share what I've learned, and then I want to encourage you to begin your own journey to connect with the signs from the loves that you have lost. Are you ready? My life changed forever on September the 4th, 2012, the day after Labor Day. 5 years earlier, I had met this incredible man, Mark Abrahamian, who was the lead guitarist of the band Starship. And we had entered into this very complicated, very deep relationship. After 2 years, we decided to part ways because the timing just was not going to work out for us. I was not able to move for him, and he wasn't willing to move for me. So we ended things, and I hadn't spoken to him for 3 years. One day, I was at my normal pond walking, just kind of deep in thought, and I walked across this bridge, and I suddenly had this thought that Mark died. Now, the reason it was such an unusual thought was because he was 46 years old and healthy as far as I knew. There was no reason for me to think he would die. Didn't really feel like my thought, and I pushed it away. About 30 minutes later, I was back at home and I was taking a shower. And I think that when we do these mundane, repetitious activities, our mind kind of goes into almost like a dreamlike state. And I think sometimes we're able to be given pieces of information. And a second thought came in. This time that he had died in a plane crash and that one of his bandmates would be calling me. Now, this thought I didn't push away because I knew it wasn't mine. If I were going to conceive of a death scene for Mark, it probably would have been from lung cancer from smoking, not from flying, which I thought was relatively safe. Knowing this thought wasn't mine, I sat there and I examined it a little bit, and it didn't make sense, and ultimately pushed it away and got on with my morning. As I was standing in front of the mirror, drying my hair, just kind of deep in thought again about these feelings and these two thoughts of Mark dying, all of a sudden, I felt this very overwhelming feeling to go and find my deceased great grandmother's ring and put it on. Now, my great grandmother had been gone for at least 10 years. And I think maybe I'd worn her ring once or twice after she died, but I wasn't even sure exactly where it was. But the feeling was so overwhelming and compelling that I stopped what I was doing and went hunting for this ring. I finally found it. I put it on and I actually said, "Okay, Grandma, are you happy now?" And went back to getting ready and I left for work. That morning, my dad had gone into work and that door just closed and slammed shut. That's so funny. I feel like maybe Mark is here listening to our story as we're talking. Anyway, my dad had gone to work that morning, and when he got to work, it was the Tuesday after Labor Day, and he had a ticker that went across his screen from CNN that said, Mark Abrahamian died on Sunday night from a massive heart attack shortly after stepping off the stage at a concert in Norfolk, Nebraska. He was only 46 years old. Now, my dad knew, of course, about my relationship with Mark, and he knew that I wasn't in contact with Mark anymore, and he sent me a text message telling me what happened. But I never got the text message. And he told my mom, and my mom called me, and I never received the phone call, despite the fact that I was in my car and a Bluetooth could have rung through. It didn't. A few minutes later, I was at my destination getting ready for a work meeting, and I noticed this missed call and voicemail from my mom. And I immediately got this horrible feeling that something was wrong. And I didn't think about what had happened earlier that morning. I actually kind of thought maybe something was wrong with my dad. So I called my mom, and her response was not understandable. She began kind of rambling on about, I'm so sorry, Lori. I think you should go home and feel your feelings." And I'm like, stop. What are you talking about? And she said, "Didn't you get your text message from your dad?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Lori, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but Mark died of a heart attack on Sunday." Well, despite having those previous thoughts. I was not prepared for this kind of news, as you can imagine. This was probably the most devastating news that I had ever gotten in my entire life. And I went in my car and I sobbed, sobbed, sobbed my eyes out. I couldn't even think, I couldn't function. All I knew was I needed to get home. So I did, I began driving. And as I was driving, I noticed the ring on my finger, that ring that my grandmother made me put on earlier that day. Yeah, I believe that my grandmother was letting me know that I was not alone on this very difficult day, that she was with me in spirit. And that's why she had compelled me to go put that ring on that morning, which was just a beautiful confirmation of the existence of life outside of this one. So ultimately, my life really changed. Not a day had gone by since I had met Mark where I hadn't thought about him. And imagine holding on to a vision of your life being a certain way in the future and then learning that it will never be that way. It was soul crushing. Really, when our relationship ended, I kind of just thought we'd push the pause button on. And maybe at this time in my life, Mark and I would somehow find a way to come back together and resume our relationship. But that dream was completely over. And something like that might not really be that hard for you to imagine. Mark's death accelerated my growth at soul growth at warp speed. I had to find him in the afterlife. He had already shown me that he wasn't really gone and that we were still connected even in death, and maybe even more now than we had been before he died. I had been on my own spiritual journey for about 11 years when Mark had entered into my life and had become, by far, without question, my greatest spiritual teacher. I learned more from him in the 2 years I had known him than I had learned in the previous 40 years I had been on this earth. After his death, I read every book I could get my hands on that talked about the afterlife or connecting to people on the other side. There was more proof than I ever could have imagined that we don't die, that our soul goes on, that love never dies. I have often said that with the perspective of time, Mark's death was not only the worst thing that ever happened to me, but also in some strange way, the best thing that ever happened to me. I had been sleepwalking through this life, and now I was fully awake, and my spiritual appetite was insatiable. It was time to step up my game, and perhaps this is your wake up call. It's time to step up your game. There has to be more to life than this. I'm going to encourage you to think differently than you've ever thought before. I'm going to ask you to connect more to your right side of your brain and to start getting used to making decisions not only with your left logical brain, which you should actually take into account, don't discount that, but also from your heart space. That's the place where you take a deep breath and you let go of the attachment to the outcome because really you can't control the outcomes, right? And then you drop down into your heart space and you listen for clarity and answers. It's also what I mean when I say connecting to your higher self, your soul aspect version that's actually guiding you on this journey from the other side. This course might actually challenge long held beliefs or expose you to ideas and concepts you've never heard of or been exposed to before. Remember, this is your journey. You can accept what feels right or resonates, and you can also discard what doesn't. The way it works for me is that, for example, when I pick up a book to read or I begin watching a video on some topic, within a few minutes, I will know if that topic feels good or if the vibration feels right. And I will maybe be drawn to watching or reading more. Sometimes, though, I pick up a book and I begin to read a few chapters and I'll get a little ways in and I'll get this overwhelming feeling of rejection. like the energy doesn't feel right and I'm repelled by the information. That's how you will know if something feels right or not to you. It's a feeling that you're going to develop more and more over time, and you'll become comfortable with recognizing it as you continue on your own spiritual journey. As you learn more, your perspectives might change. And you can always come back and revisit the pieces that you didn't initially connect with and try them again. It's your world, it's your universe, it's your time. Open up your mind to see what the universe has in store for you.